When we enter into this space, whether it is a Sunday morning or a Tuesday afternoon, we step into God's time, a liminal or transitional space between the world and heaven. Past, present, and future are all mixed together. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. We remember his death, we proclaim his resurrection, we await his coming in glory. The incarnate God is coming soon, joins us at the Eucharistic table, and is coming again, all within the space of a single worship service. And Advent, where we are awaiting both the birth of Christ and his glorious return, is an opportunity to lean into that thin place of God's time, to live into those moments where heaven seems near and we feel God's presence more closely. A time we can center ourselves and our lives in both the remembrance of the birth of Christ and in the active hope of his return that our faith both offers and requires of us. What is, what was, and what is to come all exist together in this thin place and time of Advent, which is the beginning of the church year and seems out of sync with what is going on in the rest of society. Recently, an acquaintance I hadn't seen in a while asked me how I was doing, and my automatic, non-thinking response was, just trying to hold on till the end of the year. I mean, we've got school and family and work, life in general. I am just looking forward to the end of the year and the break that comes then. Because we all get to December 31st, tired, overstimulated, overindulged, and ready to start fresh. Exercise equipment and spending plans and housekeeping all seem to offer a clean start in January, with the hope and plans that follow that this year will be different. We make resolutions. We start out strong in our resolve to do better, be better. But for us, in this place and in the worldwide church, it is the first Sunday of Advent, not December 31st, that is that fresh start. Advent ushers in a new church year with a sense of expectation and a flurry of activity. Margaret Atwood's solstice poem sums it up best for me, reminding us that we are on the threshold where the past lets go of the future, that place of caught breath. For me, that feeling is one of expectation, holding your breath, waiting, watching, wondering what comes next, even as I get ready and plan to step across the threshold into a new year. Our lectionary readings today bring us to that threshold. In Jeremiah, we are given the prophecy of what is to come, a Lord who shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. And in keeping with time being all mixed up when you're in church, our gospel readings for the beginning of Advent this year start not with the world eagerly anticipating the birth of Jesus, but rather near the end of his life, in some of his last teachings before his arrest and execution. And in our gospel lesson, Jesus warns the disciples, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth, distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So as I was preparing to preach this morning at the beginning of Advent, I was listening to a podcast about this week's lectionary readings, and one of the guests quipped that these are the Bible stories that keep me out of church. And she proceeded to list all of the things in our current reality that point to what Jesus is talking about. We've seen the northern lights in Kansas this year. There's wars around the globe, hurricanes, bomb cyclones, atmospheric rivers. These are scary times. But all of these things, war and disaster, have been true in every age. And so for me, these are the Bible stories that keep me coming back to church, because it is in these stories that we hear the promise of God. In Advent, we begin again and are reminded of that ancient promise, the impending birth of Christ and the future return and redemption of the world, all that is, was, and will be. The first candle we light on the Advent wreath represents hope. Hope in God's promise to Israel, hope in the angel foretelling the coming of Christ, hope at the tomb, hope at the ascension, where Jesus promises that he will return. One writer describes this as the ancient future promise, a reminder to ourselves and found in the words of Jeremiah and Jesus himself. Redemption is drawing near. But we find, like with those resolutions we make each January, hope is not passive, it's active. We have to work for the future we want. Jesus tells us to stand up, raise your heads when you see the signs. Emily Dickinson wrote that hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and never stops singing. I think a better description of hope comes from a meme my son Jeremiah sent me. Hope has dirt on her face, blood on her knuckles, the grit of cobblestones in her hair, and has just spat out a tooth as she stands up and rises for another go. I couldn't find the author, but that image will not leave me alone. And it begins to blur with the images in my mind of the hours before the crucifixion. And it also blends with and merges with the images of a young mother, unwed, offering herself in service, carrying the hope of the world in less than ideal circumstances. On that long ago Christmas Eve, God became incarnate in the person of Jesus to bring hope to a weary world, one that was filled with famine and oppression, war and injustice. His birth was foretold by the angels, who said he would be given the throne of David and his kingdom would have no end. God's voice claimed him as his beloved son at his baptism. But even with all of that buildup, Jesus spent his time here not ruling, serving and loving, and teaching his disciples to do the same, telling them that people would know they were his by their love. And he ended his mortal life bloodied, with grit on his face, offering hope to us all. His whole life and ministry was the work of service and love in the face of doubt, derision, threats, and beatings. His work was teaching us what it is that is ours to do as we await redemption. And so, as we enter into this new year, this Advent time of remembrance of what was, what is, and will be, a season of expectation, waiting, and hope, ushered in by the transformative chain of events that were set in motion when God became incarnate. Emmanuel, God with us. And so, as Jesus told the disciples, when we see the signs, know that our redemption is near. But notice that the word is near, not coming, but near. We can reach out, almost touch it. Time and space, past, present, and future are all jumbled together. We are in God's time, where Jesus died, lived, is with us now today, and is coming again. And so how do we live into this season where the rest of the world is waiting only for Christmas morning and New Year's Day in order to begin again? We start anew today. Our resolutions to love and serve start now, not in January. We engage in the work that Jesus gave us to do. Active hope. Participate in the redemption of the world through love and service. Be alert. Know that God is near.